people counting on us. And look, I count on you. I couldn't do what I do without you. And we're all in this together. And again, it feels good to have people look up to me. It's just that 50% of it feels good, but the other 50 is the responsibility. When you see all these people counting on you, and I realize that a lot of them think that I or my audience, that we're somehow going to turn this around. And I got news for you, folks. It's going to be you that turns it around. And to see the economy hurting, to see so many businesses here in Austin, which is doing better than most areas of the country, shut down, and to see people not having enough money to take care of their families, and to see prosperity being sucked out of this nation. It could all just be turned around if we didn't have these vicious criminals running our society who openly admit that they're at war with prosperity. They don't want you prosperous. They want you super poor, so you're totally dependent on them. It's feudalism. That's how they, in ancient Europe, had control of people. And it is a revolution against free society. The globalists are the revolutionaries. They're the people waging war against society. And as the New World Order unfolds, it does get heavier and heavier. It gets more and more out in the open. And it cuts right to my soul just how real this is. I wish it wasn't. We'll be back. Stay with us. Okay, I want to get into some of the other news here and then more of your calls and Bev Harris. But every time I see articles like this one, it just reminds me that government and big institutions can't and won't protect you. And the idea that government will deliver you your food and your job and your vacation and will make decisions for you, and the idea that that's going to work is a proven historical fraud. And now that they've added technological overlays to it, it's only made it worse. I mean, I saw an article where thousands of people a year, the LA Times reported, are charged just in mistakes because the government doesn't have their name right. And how in California, the police are exempt and government workers from having their license plates read by license plate reading cameras. Side issue. But I see this article out of the Daily Mail. There's one out of Reuters about, chain of errors cause disaster and in cruise ship sinking. But here's one out of the Daily Mail. I saw captain drinking in the bar. Passengers arrest officer of socializing before cruise crash and being among first to abandon ship. And I know that does it even matter anymore? It doesn't matter if it's Katrina. It doesn't matter if it's a forest fire. It doesn't matter what it is. The government just generally gets in the way and screws everything up. And then even in a private cruise ship, every time they have one of these big disasters, the captain is drunk as a skunk. And then puts out some big story about how the charts were wrong. I mean, he ran the boat up on the beach. He ran it right into the island. Now, if a captain can screw up like this with 4,000 people on board, and if governments can't help you during Katrina, but they can sure come take your guns in a beta test, how's the government going to protect you if an airborne Ebola or smallpox or something like that gets put out in the atmosphere? I mean, let's say the government doesn't release it on purpose because they want to reduce population. How long until they have a mistake and release it? The government admits that they released weaponized Lyme's disease out of the Plum Island facility off the coast of New York. And it first showed up in Lyme, Connecticut, hence the name Lyme's disease. I mean, how many times, and they've got hundreds of these labs all over the country with airborne weaponized stuff that will kill 9 out of 10 or more. I'm just rounding down. Between 92 and 99% of those that come in contact with these different things. And they've got facilities all over the country with this, and it's only a matter of time until a crazy person sneaks out of the lab with it and releases it, or somebody makes a mistake, or the government releases it and claims somebody made a mistake or that a crazy person did it, and they put the patsy on television. And what do you think's going to happen when an airborne bioweapon gets out? And by the way, it'll be just like the foot and mouth in 2000 in England that showed up in locations from southern Scotland all the way down to Cornwall and all the way down to the southern coast of England. In a 2-day period, it shows up all over the country. It had been distributed on purpose. I saw that map day one and said it's government. It's weaponized. It's killing. I went and looked up foot and mouth and sheep and cows, and it kills a very small percentage, less than 10%. And I was like, this is killing more than half of them. It's weaponized. Not because I'm a rocket scientist, but I know how to look into stuff. And then about a year later, in the BBC and the London Guardian, there was a little footnote of, oh, there was a level 4 bioweapons lab testing zoological weaponized animal diseases, and they believe that some type of extremist working at the lab got it out and released it. Well, that would have happened in 1 or 2 spots, not all over the country in one day, showing up everywhere, swabbed onto the animals. So don't think you're going to go hide out in the country when the new flu gets out. It's going to be getting sprayed from drones, folks. It isn't going to be person to person. They're going to spray the entire country with this stuff. Oh, man, we're in so much trouble. Okay, we're back live. Thank you for joining us. We have undoubtedly the preeminent researcher into election fraud in the last few decades. And, of course, the HBO documentary Black Box Voting was seen by tens of millions. And we've seen just in the last 5-6 years, national numbers go from less than 10% believing there's election fraud to over 70% in some polls, 90% in some of the others. And a lot of that's thanks to Bev Harris of blackboxvoting.org. I saw an article yesterday that we also posted at Infowars.com from Black Box Voting. Recipe for vote fraud. Global internet voting firm buys U.S. election results reporting firm. Now, remember, Bev, 2 days before the Iowa caucuses, she said, listen, the fact that they're counting it at a secret location, if any of the precincts don't report or don't call it in properly or don't show people the results, that's where you'll find fraud. And now we have the clip we played a few weeks ago of Karl Rove on Fox News as their correspondent saying, yes, well, some of the precincts didn't come in, so we had a gentleman's agreement and gave Santorum 6 more points, so he got second place instead of Paul. I mean, they just hide this stuff in plain view. And then, of course, Ron Paul was happy with his second place there in New Hampshire. But even local Iowa newspapers reported on all the weirdness that went on. So it's all about that funnel she talks about. When stuff's in public, it's out in the open, but it's that little bitty thin area, that Strait of Hormuz, where the problems can happen. And that's where, you know, the lights go off like in the mystery movie. When they come back on, well, the Maltese Falcon has been stolen or whatever the case is. Or grandma's, you know, secret recipe has been stolen. And so this report breaks it down, and she joins us now to also give us any other developments that she's looking at. Bev, thanks for coming on.
Hi, Alex. Well, yeah, and if I could, I'd like to just make a quick comment on that Iowa situation before we move on to the global situation. You know, Iowa was very interesting because it looks like Santorum either won or, well, at any rate, Romney didn't win. and there were some incidents, but there's a big difference between setting it up properly, which they really did in Iowa, so that people can see when stuff is wrong. It was an alert citizen by the name of Edward True who was attending, who was able to see when they announced the vote that it did not match what got called into the Republican Party. And in fact, Romney only had 2 votes, and they called in 22 votes. And as those who've been following this may know, there was only 8 votes, reported to have separated them. So in fact, Romney didn't win. And all this we're seeing on the media, Romney won and it's historic and blah, blah, blah. He didn't win. But the reason we know he didn't win was because it was done in public. There was another very interesting clip I saw. Actually, I think you may have broken this story in Scott County, where as they were turning in the ballots, the lights went off for like 15 or 20 seconds. Well, here's the thing. When you set it up properly, and I do think that Iowa is really how we need to be setting a lot of this stuff up, the fact that we know that the fact they had to turn the lights off in the first place was because the public was there able to watch. The fact that we know the lights got turned off was because the public was there able to watch. So we have to kind of separate catching people in fraud when it's set up so that we can catch them in fraud, which is what we at least want. We at least want to be able to catch them, versus the more dangerous situations where we can't even catch them because it's concealed.
Now, I want to talk briefly just about how voter news services worked previously, how nationally you could have Karl Rove in 2000 announce the opposite of what the other networks announced. It turned out the other networks were accurate, and then Karl Rove was just appointing himself king. And again, I'm not an Al Gore supporter, folks, but facts are facts here. But I want to play this clip from Iowa, since you mentioned it, before we get into this big breaking news that you've got for us here, Bev. I want to play this little clip. This is from Fox News, but we've added the little Kentucky Derby clip where he says, and out of nowhere, Santorum, comes into the lead. But other than that, this is Karl Rove on Fox News. Here it is.
Romney is going to win the Iowa caucuses by 14 votes. How solid is your evidence?
From a pretty good, reliable source. They made the correction in Story County, which moved it from an 18-point margin for Santorum to a 4-vote margin for Santorum. Clinton County, right. You have the one outstanding precinct in the state, and that it will show an 18-vote victory in that precinct for Mitt Romney, which will give him a statewide victory of 14 votes over.
And from out of nowhere, it's Rick Santorum.
So I don't understand. You're saying that they basically have come to an agreement as to what the vote's going to be in Clinton?
The person who's got the official piece of paper is missing. But the Romney and Santorum people who are monitoring it agree on what the number is. They apparently have rounded up the representatives of the camps who have agreed, yes, we were there, we know exactly what the vote total was, and we both agreed to what it was.
So, Bev, what do you make of that? They agree, then, who the winner is now.
Well, that was pretty bogus, but I do know about that situation, and that particular situation actually turned out to be acceptably transparent. What had happened is the result was called in, and the woman went home and was ready to go to bed, and they said they didn't have the results or whatever. But at any rate, the result that finally made its way in was verified by people who were there and people who were watching and so forth. The key here is you got to be able to see what's going on.
Exactly, and anybody that...
if you can see it, then when they do monkey business like this, somebody steps forward, and the great part is they never know who has their cell phone out taking a picture of what's going on. So it's very likely when people are organized like they were with Ron Paul in Iowa, that it's going to get caught.
Well, Bev, I mean, just as a layman here who's been watching this for 17 years and having experts like yourself on this key subject, the idea that we're just supposed to trust these electronic voting machine companies who've been caught cheating, manipulating,